The next major thing for Star Citizen is server-side object container streaming. This is the current bottleneck in a series of tech that they need to complete to expand out the universe, improve performance, get more players in each server, have new star systems, and have permanent progression. It is core to the tech of the game. Let's talk about the expectations of this tech, server meshing, persistence, problems that CIG in the game might face, and when we're likely to see it. Currently, a single server is responsible for the entire gameplay area, the Stanton system, which is constantly being tracked. There is only one star system though, but lots of instances of that one star system, and when you change something on one, it does not change it on another server. As a single server is responsible for the entire gameplay area, that is one of the reasons we only have 50 players per server. Server object container streaming allows the server to stand by gameplay areas if they have no players proximate to that area, and then activate them when players get close by again. This tech should be paired with further optimizations when it comes to the generation and clear up of missions, NPCs, entities, which are all extremely important, and a lot of that is generated on the fly or in response to players being in that area and based on what is going on in the game world. Server-side object container streaming does not solve all of the issues with Star Citizen's network code though. It is not a magic bullet. It is another step towards what is needed to make Star Citizen an MMO. It's also an essential component of Squadron 42, the single-player campaign of Star Citizen, as effectively your PC acts as both server and client, and there's a lot of core tech tied to that as part of the game, so it's just sort of needed for it. So what can we expect with server-side object container streaming? CIG have actually been quite juxtaposed in their responses, saying that it might not add much in the way of performance gains, but also it's apparently like night and day, and it gives similar gains and performance and allows for a lot more in a similar way to how client-side object container streaming opened up frame rates for us. The goal of server-side object container streaming, however, is not for direct client performance boosts. It may allow for more players on a single server, but again, that's not its goal. It should improve server performance with less server crashes, less degradation, a better hit registration, less issues with AI, less issues with rubber banding, better frame rates if the server had been bottlenecking those frame rates. Server-side object container streaming's main goal is to improve server efficiency and individual server efficiency so that when they move on to server meshing, they have the most efficient state a server can be in, which will literally be the bottleneck for how many players they can have in individual areas. How many players can they efficiently cram in a single room? How many can they have in a single ship? And then how can they track those ships so that you can have people flying around in javelins with 200 people on, fighting in a battle with loads and loads of other capital ships that are all flying around each other, because then you can have potentially tens of thousands of players in a single battle, but it's only tracking what their ships are doing. Originally, full persistence and server-side object container streaming were going to be unified. This would have objects saved where you placed them on the server, when the area went into standby, and even between when server crashes, and potentially between servers they could sort of like hand the data over to each other. So when you load back in, you'd be exactly where you were when you logged out, and anything that you had placed in the universe would also be where you left it. It's not clear at this stage though whether CIG want to have some of the changes you have affected in the world load in with you, or if they just stay in the server that you left in, and exactly what changes are tied to you being logged in. Do you just appear in front of other people, that sort of stuff? However, whatever their decision regarding this will likely be a temporary measure, as server meshing could eventually solve this by having everyone in the same mega meshed server. The issue is, we don't 100% know how the tech is going to work, and CIG certainly don't until it's in their hands. So CIG have actually since said that they can decouple some of the persistence and server-side object container features and release them in step. So there is an expectation that some of this might come with Alpha 3.8 by the end of this year. Partial persistence with Alpha UEC and purchases with Alpha UEC could be carried over between patches, and that is a big potential for 3.8. That is not a confirmation. Also, it does not mean that there will be no more resets, but there's less reasons to have resets, and they're much less likely. We could see CIG just reset the databases if they need to change something major, or if they're changing over from Alpha UEC to UEC. And once we're actually all spending UEC in game rather than Alpha UEC, then I would expect us to have permanent progression. There's also another big indicator that we should be getting at least some optimizations or server-side object container streaming by the end of the year, and that's that Planet Microtech, which is another big expansion to the gameplay area of Star Citizen, and its moons are expected in 3.8 still and listed on the roadmap. So expect at least some of server-side object container streaming type features or optimizations to be there. Server meshing, however, is a little way off yet. This allows for multiple servers to hand information off to each other seamlessly and look after different areas of the Stanton system. So you could have each individual planet and area of space controlled by a different server, and also allows for different star systems. So it's believed that server meshing is required to have more star systems in the game. And this comes in two stages: static server meshing, where individual planets and areas of space have their own servers, and dynamic server meshing, which will allow any given object container, be it a room, ship, building, whatever, to become a server based on the player population of that area. This does still leave questions of what will CIG do if server meshing doesn't work as intended. How exactly will CIG prevent 20,000 players from trying to have an organization party in a single bar in-game? If some players are separated by different servers, then, because they can't have all those people in the same area, how are their changes going to affect the game world? Is it going to be, if I try and attack someone's ship, will it just like randomly appear in front of me? Will it disappear? Some of this CIG have previously talked about. There will be a system that tracks changes in the game world, missions, NPCs, simulates those NPCs, records data of player changes, missions that have been completed, all of that sort of jazz. And this is going to affect the game world, producing appropriate missions, changing the cost of goods, probabilities of NPCs spawning in and getting attacked by players, or receiving distress signals and getting interdicted, all part of the greater subsumption system. To what level it will track a player placing a rock on the ground in a certain way, and that data being saved, that's a more complex question. We know that the world will have to spawn entities, missions, loot, and points of interest in. The most likely system CIG will use is where items persist where you leave them based on a level of importance. An item that has value, like a weapon placed by a player, may persist where you left it for a month, whereas a rock might persist for an hour if you've thrown it. Exactly how you log back into a different server and any changes that would load back in with you, we are not entirely sure. It's very possible that they will try and target the server you were originally on, so you're more likely to see the changes you made in the game if they do it that way. It's going to be based on whether they have to split up players in the same area and how exactly they do that. So if they have to split up players in certain areas, it's more likely that they'll just clean up changes there, and basically those changes won't be saved, those changes in the game world. Now, this is much more likely to happen in hub areas, so major landing zones or trade hubs where you'd have janitors and people cleaning up and that sort of stuff, so they can explain this sort of stuff away in lore. And it makes more sense that those players would be much more visited by players and have a much higher player density, especially in the more popular ones, like obviously in EVE Online you have Cheetah, where it's a huge trade hub and players spend a huge portion of their time there on average. Server meshing will allow them to then go, well, they can have certain areas of these hubs as more important than others, and even restrict access to some of these areas if they wished. So my thinking is that certain areas, like individual physicalized hubs that they want to have, or individual physicalized hangars, they're going to be less visited by large groups of players at the same time, each individual one anyway. So my personal hangar is less likely to have 20,000 people coming to it at the same time. So in areas of cities that get overpopulated, they could delay trains, raise prices, slow elevators, or otherwise artificially bottleneck areas to keep player populations down. That could even be have more enemy activity on the systems that are proximate to it, make the trade routes less profitable, have warp storms in areas so you can't use a wormhole so often, something like that. There's lots and lots of ways they could artificially, in the lore, lower sort of like players in a certain area. CIG won't know exactly how effective server-side object container streaming, server meshing, and all of that tech will be though, until they've completed and optimized it. how many players will we get on each server? It will be more, and as many as CIG can manage, but we don't know how many and when. Static server meshing will allow for a lot more players. Dynamic server meshing, even more. We might not get any more players with server-side object container streaming though, but there is a possibility that we will. Server-side object container streaming could be here by the end of 2019. Static server meshing could potentially be in our hands in 2020, as could a new system. Dynamic server meshing, I have no details on. I'm expecting them to be consistently working towards that. So they are working on optimizations. They are working on server-side object container streaming at the moment. I believe there's people working on static server meshing at the moment as well, but obviously server optimizations, server-side object container streaming are prerequisites of that. CIG have jokingly said that they'd like to get 1 million players in each area. Now, what's true with that statement is that they'd like to get as many players as possible in each area, and they are working towards that. But to what extent that's going to be, we'll have to wait and see. But I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, do you think we'll see server-side object container streaming and some more progression of like Alpha UEC and Alpha UEC purchases by the end of the year? Do you think we'll see a new star system next year? Do you think we'll see static server meshing? Or do you think some of this stuff is a lot further out than has been suggested? Whatever your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Every month we have a ship giveaway. For October, it's an Anvil Carrack Explorer ship that should hopefully be flyable in Alpha 3.8 at the end of the year. Just comment on any of my videos made during October to be in for a chance to win that. I am also shilling for NordVPN and Shadow gaming PCs, so use the code BoredGamer for discounts there. NordVPN, in a world of censorship and privacy issues, VPNs allow you to browse the net and play games in more safety. NordVPN has many benefits over free VPNs, and that's why I shill for it. Some of you also might be interested in Shadow cloud gaming stuff. This allows you an alternative to sort of like buying and maintaining your own gaming PC. You can stream a custom Windows 10 environment to devices like your phone, a laptop, or a crappier, lesser PC, and bam, it's fantastically powerful and it's maintained and hardware is regularly updated for you. It's a fantastic service, Shadow. Cloud gaming certainly has quite a big future ahead of it. If you'd like to further support my channel, please consider subscribing, sharing this video, ringing the YouTube bell so you get notifications when a video goes live. This is a channel that is funded by the community via donations, Patreon members, YouTube members, and anyone else that wants to get involved with comments and helping. Thank you to everyone that goes the extra mile. Take care, and I will see you in the verse.